Welcome to Footie Takes, the latest podcast to give you weekly insights into Europe's top leagues. In this week's episode, we discuss United's home victory over Liverpool in the FA Cup, Chelsea's decision to sack Frank Lampard, Borussia Dortmund's loss to Mönchengladbach, and more. My name is Jack. Joining me are Charlie, Henry, and Jack. We hope you enjoy. Okay, I think we should start with one of the more interesting matches of the weekend, which would have been Manchester United playing Liverpool in the FA Cup. The match ended 3-2 to Manchester United. Charlie, was that a fair result?
I think, genuinely, it reflects the current state of affairs. Salah opened with, I thought, a great goal, 18th minute, and then United equalised. It was an amazing run from Rashford, and he flicked it to Greenwood. Going into the second, I thought we'd edged them. And then they scored again. Rashford scored again in the 46th. Mo equalised soon after. And then obviously it's the Bruno free kick that everyone's talking about. But to be fair, I thought up until the 70th minute, we were the better team. We're playing two defensive midfielders as centre-backs. And there's only so much you can do, especially against a top team, which United are proving they are, as much as I'd like to argue. But what did you guys take from that? Obviously, it was on BBC One, so I'm sure a lot of people watched it. What did you think, Henry?
See, the thing is, mate, I disagree with your point about United. I think they've had a very fortunate run of games. I think they've been fortunate in a lot of their games. I mean, I still don't think Ollie's the man for him. I still don't think Ollie's the man to lead him forward. I still think that Pogba doesn't want to be there, no matter how well United are playing now, and yet they've got a top player in Van der Beek who can't get a game in over him. You know, you look at how well he played today, or yesterday, sorry. You look at how well he played against United.
Did they stub him off?
Yeah, they did.
Five in the first half. And I think they took him off and put Fernandes on, but I could be wrong.
Look, even so, mate, I mean, let's talk about Fernandes for a minute. What a player he is. I mean, I'd love to sit here and slag him off until the cows come home because, you know, I'm Arsenal. But he really is a hell of a player. I mean, I think he gets a bit of unfair slack, Fernandes and all that. I do think he's a top player, and I think he'd walk into any club in the Premier League right now, quite frankly.
Is he player of the season?
He's got to be, isn't he? So far, I think he's got to be. I really do.
United. When Henderson lost the Player of the Year to De Bruyne, I can accept De Bruyne because he is consistently over seasons established that he is one of the best. But Fernandes, I don't think so. I think they've got lucky decisions, and he's the one to take the penalty. You know, I don't think he's on De Bruyne's level. Nowhere near. Coutinho was better than him.
I disagree. I mean, I think on the whole basis, I do think De Bruyne is probably the better player. But the way that De Bruyne has been so fortunate with injuries this season, he hasn't really played that much. And when he has played, he hasn't looked to his best, I'd say. I think you've got to say Fernandes has edged in this season. I think on the whole, De Bruyne is still a better player. But I just think Fernandes edges it ever so slightly on the balance of what we've seen this season.
It's sad that I thought at the start of the season, James Rodriguez was going to come in and they had their little kazoo title race. So I'm interested in what Jack has to say about Everton. And, you know, I think James has dropped off. We haven't seen him since the full year. And I thought he'd be in the run-ins. I thought he was going to blow Fernandes out of the water, but that's just not happening.
Well, with James, it's pretty simple. It's that he, midway through, had an injury against Liverpool. And since then, he wasn't really the same. But he's coming back now. I'm pretty sure he will get back to what it was at the start of the season. When you're a bit injured and you're playing with an injury, it's always going to be a bit worse. But his technical ability is up there with the best in the Premier League. But with the Liverpool game, it was just I was really, really happy to finally see a team get at Liverpool's weak defence. If you contrast that to the last game, Man United was so defensive against a back line that you think it's really vulnerable at the moment. But you still kind of feel like teams are just so afraid of Liverpool's front three that they just were always scared to attack and go on the offensive. Where now I think more and more teams are realising that, especially after that loss to Burnley, that this front three themselves have lost confidence. And
the Southampton game showed that even before then. I know that only was the point that you were like, wow. Like I knew when Danny trotted it past us that we were in a dire state, and that was the week before. And,
I think Klopp's biggest crime is his almost refusal to rotate that front three.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no matter how inconsistent or how, low in confidence they are, he will continue to play them. And I can kind of understand it because one goal might be all they need to kickstart them. But at the same time...
Because Jota has his injury, and I know you could say, okay, well, you've got Minamino, Shaq, Origi, but they're just not...
Problem. I think Liverpool, on a first 11 basis, have the best first 11 in the Premier League, right? That's unquestionable. Look at, the way they won the league last season. I think basing it on a first 11, they're the best first 11 in the Premier League. But they have no squad depth whatsoever. None. Absolutely none.
I absolutely agree. If you look at the kind of players they've even brought in to be, quote, depth, they're not challenging. And that's what you mentioned earlier with the kind of refusal to rotate the first three. It's that who are you going to put in for them? If you honestly, the drop in quality of, say, from the likes of Firmino to Origi, or if you go from, on the right, if you go from Salah to Shaqiri, who's actually, I guess, their best out of the three rotation option, or from Mane to Minamino, it's just such a decline. And the thing is, they haven't bought in, and again, I guess they bought in Jota to be that kind of.
I think Jota's a quality player. I do think
coming back in maybe 2 weeks. I think the West Ham game. I don't think we'll have him for Spurs on Thursday.
Here's the issue, though, with Liverpool at the moment, is that they just 2 years ago they won the Champions League. Last year they won a Premier League almost undefeated, and yet they're still buying in players that don't seem to be world class. Or don't seem to be at that top level, and the same they still seem to have this habit of buying like mid-20s kind of cheap players.
Up to it, I think Thiago hasn't quite been what we,
There was a lot of criticism of Thiago after his performance this weekend.
Yeah,
he's not had that breakout yet. I think he's assisted. He's not scored yet. It's been a while now. It's been quite a few fixtures.
I think the problem with Thiago is he was injured for such a long time. I think he needed that period where he was injured. He needed playing to get to grips with the league, to get to grips with the style of football. He hasn't had that chance, really, I'd say.
I know he's not used to the officiating or the way that it is, and decisions don't really go your way. And he's like, sometimes you look at him, like there's so many pictures of him on the pitch and he looks puzzled. He is not a climber to the Premier League. Thiago Silva had a rocky go at Chelsea, but he's sort of doing quite well now. And I think, they came in at a similar time. And
I think another factor, and I don't mean any disrespect to Liverpool here, but I think another factor is that there is a drop in the player quality around him as well. If we look at the Bayern Munich team that just won the Champions League, that this is clearly the best team in Europe right now, by quite a long way. To then go to a Liverpool team that seems to be on the decline, there is going to be a difference felt with him, I think, and that is going to make it harder for him to connect to the people around him.
Because he also got injured in the Merseyside derby, as well as Virgil, and then shortly after Joe Gomez, and now Jota, and it's like, when people are dropping like flies around you, it's hard to, because he's probably playing with different squads every time he's come on, and he's just not had the consistency, like a run of 5 fixtures where he's had the same team. So I agree with you that he probably just, and I know they train like training, but I think it's crazy. He's probably a bit behind in terms of like
a final point to mention, really. I mean, it surprises me how many people haven't really mentioned the fact he's come from the Bundesliga. You look at how many players have come over to the UK from the Bundesliga in the last few seasons who haven't really adapted. I mean, Liverpool have got another prime example in Naby Keita.
Yeah.
I mean, he's had flashes of brilliance, but he's never really become the player that Liverpool fans would have expected.
He's got Gerrard's number, and it's like, wow. He comes on. I remember being in the pub with Jack and we were watching Liverpool Southampton and he scored. I was like, yes. And it's so hard when you've got a player whose peak is here, but they're always here, And he's just not. He's not worth the 54 million or whatever we spent.
Is is that a conversation that's worth having, that maybe there is a level of football that is seen in the Bundesliga and then in the Premier League that certain players can't adapt to when they make the move over here?
The best cases would be Chelsea, I think, with Kai Havertz, with Timo Werner.
Precisely.
Said, I think Werner took a knock against Brighton. Lewis Dunk, who's like a big defender, and he was like, Jesus. Like, he's like, wow. Like, in the Prem, the aerial duels, Thiago Silva instead, and it's just more intense. You know, people will hack you down, and it really is the physicality element. I think they you know, they're not used to.
Well, Jack, what I'd like to ask you is to just, you're obviously an Everton fan. John Joe Kenny did so well for Schalke a couple of seasons ago on loan. It might have been last season. He did so well for them on loan. He was in their starting 11 every game. He was, you know, a lot of Schalke fans liked him. He's come back to Liverpool, and he's got a look in. So,
well, I'd say with the likes of John Joe Kenny, it's I can't fully understand it either, because there was a time when Seamus Coleman was out, who was a first choice left back and captain, and John Joe Kenny wasn't playing, and he was playing Ben Godfrey at right back, and my assumption was, okay, it's because he's injured too, John Joe Kenny. But I found out later he wasn't injured, and he wasn't on the bench. Ancelotti just didn't pick him. But it was a very strange. Ancelotti does sometimes still play him. Like, in the cup game, he put him on off the bench, but he only seems to ever just play him like just when he's just putting a ton of defenders on, just randomly, or like, oh, he's a defending kind of player, just put him on. It's very strange. I do see him. When I heard about him being linked to Burnley, I did personally believe him, but apparently Ancelotti said that he's not expecting anyone to leave. So it looks like John Joe Kenny's going to stay at Everton, but just be Everton's fourth choice of right back, which I just think is a real shame.
Okay, so we talked about Liverpool quite a bit, but what about Manchester United? I mean, they seem to be doing okay. They've just beaten Liverpool in the FA Cup. They're near the top of the league. Are they top of the league, or are they near the top of the league in the Premier League?
My understanding, they are top of the league, but obviously City have got a game in hand. Yeah.
So, are they a good side, or is it just that everyone else is doing poorly this season?
Well, the thing is with Man United is that you watch them in games like at the beginning of the season. I remember one game, especially against West Ham, where they were just dreadful for like 2/3 of the game, and West Ham were winning 1-0 up to that point. They could have got more goals, but then for like 20 minutes or so, they kind of just turned it on and they scored 3 goals.
But that's what United do every game this season. That's what United are doing every game this season. They're playing so poorly for 70, 80 minutes, and then for that final 10 minutes, it's just they go up again.
Yeah, it's insane. But it's like that's what the teams that win the league do. It's that they somehow, when they don't appear to be on top, manage to get the 3 points. And you do kind of wonder with this team about whether or not there's any real leadership and how long it can last. And it wouldn't surprise me at all, given the lack of experience still with the manager and what we've seen by the likes of Pogba before, that they will just crumble. I personally do reckon City are the favourites, but
have they? I mean, they got beat 6-1 by Tottenham, so let's not forget that, right?
Yeah, that's true. That was true.
On that same token, Liverpool got beaten 7-2 by Villa, Charlie. You can't sit there and say there are going to be a lot of freak results. There are going to be a lot of freak results this season.
Yeah, is there a big team in the Premier League that hasn't had a humiliating loss this season?
Precisely.
Chelsea, yeah. Do you know what? A lot of teams have dropped points to Fulham, West Brom. We have, City have. It's crazy, you know. It happens, and I like that element to it, you know.
But I would say with Liverpool, and there actually is a lack of character at Liverpool, I think. But it's not the same lack of character of when they're on top and keep with the confidence when they're on top. It's about picking themselves up when they're down. That's what Liverpool seem to be struggling with. The best teams, when they have a down patch, they have the confidence in themselves to get themselves back up and firing quickly within a few games. Liverpool really seem to be struggling because it's like the first time that team has been in a patch like this, and you are seeing that kind of heads down, like the Trent Alexander-Arnold, quite a young player still, putting something like 30 misplaced crosses in one game, and they are struggling. They are really struggling, I think, because of that. And you did see Man United.
Yeah,
but with Man United, that's the same thing because they lost when they lost 6-1. that showed a lack of character. I know they were man down, but it showed a lack of character and a lack of, kind of ability to really get in the game again. They put their own heads down. Where with Man City, by contrast, they had a dodgy pass at the beginning of the season, yet they were able to regroup relatively quickly, and now they look unstoppable again. So I reckon that's the difference between Man City and the likes of Liverpool and Man United at the moment.
See, my opinion on United is this. I mentioned it briefly when we spoke about Liverpool. I think, like I said, United have a squad to compete for the title. I do think that. I genuinely do. I think maybe their defence is a bit meh, but I think Luke Shaw in the last few weeks has proved he probably is England's best left back. Hey, I don't care what anyone says. He's still one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League.
Dean Henderson played though, and he did well. It was a cup game.
That's the FA Cup. If we're talking about the Premier League,
I know.
United are top on. It's
backup defence, like backup goalkeeper. That is amazing. Like Dean Henderson.
It is. It's brilliant to have a keeper like that. I mean, you look at Arsenal when we have Martinez as our backup keeper. It's amazing to have two fantastic goalkeepers.
Also in the FA Cup, Chelsea beat Luton by 3-1, although the biggest story to come out of Chelsea would be the sacking of Frank Lampard earlier on today. So Pinfold, was it a good decision by Chelsea to sack Frank Lampard?
Well, I think it's kind of in line with the way they've kind of operated for all these years. I mean, I think many people, when Frank first took the job, knew the nature of Chelsea. But we kind of had thought, given the nature of the player and the history of the club, that perhaps they'll be much more lenient with Frank. But turns out, no, of course. They've just been as harsh with him as they've been with any other manager. The results just purely haven't been good enough. I think during the first year, although most people were quite impressed with the position that Chelsea were able to get in the league table, given the transfer ban this season, with the money being spent and the transfers being brought in, it's just simply hasn't been good enough.
So you mean they got into the Champions League, so they were content with getting into the Champions League, right?
Well, I think most managers at Chelsea, they're actually expected to win something. Like if they don't, I feel like just with Chelsea, Champions League just isn't enough.
The question is, when Lampard came in, was it an improvement over Mauricio Sarri? No, he was not.
He'd just come off the back of winning the Europa League. They've done this a couple of times, right? Conte, didn't he get a double and they let him go? And now with Sarri as well, it's just their standards. I get it. They are a club that is very cutthroat, but with Lampard, one of their own.
Yeah, I felt like with the whole Lampard thing, and you can actually see this, I think, with some of the supporters believing that it was the wrong decision. I think the fans would have wanted Lampard to have been given more time, perhaps to the end of the season, in comparison to other managers. And I think perhaps just what he's done for the club over the years and his history of them kind of perhaps made him deserve that. I think, what he did with last season, with not just, you could say what you want about the position, but it can't just made Chelsea a somewhat likable team for the first time I can remember. I mean, Chelsea were always known as a big spending club, a club that have been accused of just buying titles, where obviously with the likes of Abraham and Mason Mount being given their breaks by Frank Lampard.
Seeing the youth prospects.
What did they do this summer? What did they do this summer? Spend £220 million.
Yeah, they did, but he never really sidelined the youth players who
I think what Jack's trying to say is last season they really used their youth, and it was great because they were doing well, and it was a blend.
I disagree with this notion. That Chelsea are a club that bleed youth, that bring through youth, that have a good youth category. They are the club in the Premier League that send out the most players on loan. Right? They send out the most players on loan.
They are not a club.
Their transfer embargo is their juggling of the youth players and the loans, and we all know.
But that's my point.
They're a club that are based on making a profit, right?
But that's not that's not a point. It made Chelsea like club.
AC Milan and things like that. I do agree slightly with what Henry's saying.
No, I think that it's fair to say that because of everything that happened when he first joined the club, and because of the embargo, that I would say there was a lot more patience with him. Because, I don't know how you guys feel, but I personally was never convinced by Lampard. And so I think that purely because he was able to survive and get into the Champions League without being able to sign anyone, and given Chelsea's history of signing players, everyone was like, okay, when he can sign players, he's going to be amazing. But he just hasn't been. So
I think when you look, and he got the same results at Derby, 4th, that he did with Chelsea last season, 4th. So it's like, that is his level. And I think, they've brought in these players.
Don't make me laugh, Charlie. You say that, and I agree with you 100%, mate. Like, his level is his championship. And I don't mean to sound like
I agree with you 100%.
I'm bashing Chelsea or I'm bashing Lampard for the sake of it. But I think he's a young manager. He literally just retired. He basically walked straight into a manager's job at Chelsea and Derby, sorry. And yeah, he achieved quite well with that Derby squad, considering Derby are flirting with relegation this year, and that was only 2 years ago. I think what he did with that Derby squad was good. Obviously, there was a lot of controversy. What happened with Leeds, the Leeds fiasco with the Bielsa Spygate, and there's a lot. And then, like you said, I think last season, he overachieved personally, because they were on the back end of that transfer embargo. They couldn't sign anyone. All he could really do was bleed through youth. And I think the players he did bring through, fantastic. Mason Mount, I think he's a brilliant player. Callum Hudson-Odoi, I think he's a brilliant player. Right? What worries me the most now is you've got Tuchel coming in. He couldn't get the best out of Neymar, Di Maria and Mbappe at PSG.
It's true.
What makes Chelsea fans think he's going to get the best out of Havertz and Werner?
No,
I agree with you, and I'm not convinced by Tuchel as a manager. He needed to do far better with PSG, but what I will say as a kind of devil's advocate is that I think that we all of us overestimate how good PSG are because of their front line. They obviously have an amazing front line, but aside from that, what do they have? The midfield's average.
Because with Tuchel,
they're struggling. They're struggling this season in the Liga. I agree, 100%. Sorry, Charlie. Go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to say Tuchel. Obviously, he can handle having superstars and in the dressing room and things like that. So I think obviously Thiago Silva, former PSG captain, is at Chelsea. I think there's an opportunity there. I think he could do well at Chelsea. But
I actually disagree. I don't think Chelsea have any superstars at their club at the moment. I mean, think about it. Who have they got? Who would you say is their main?
I think it's a hot take.
Kante. I'd say N'Golo Kante.
I mean,
Kante is a world-class player.
Are they saying that?
People have said he's on decline.
You're right. You're right. Think about it. You're right.
Look, although Kante is a world-class player,
I don't think he personally is.
Do you think it's the team around him?
No, he hasn't. He's very humble. He's a very humble person. He comes across as very humble.
Yeah, of course. He was in the second division in France. He's not, or doesn't matter how good he'll get. He'll always be a humble person, just in his nature. Whereas the difference between the likes of like Neymar or someone like that, who's got a bit of an arrogance problem. Perhaps in Chelsea they may have that, but with some certain players. But the reality is they're just not good enough. They haven't earned their arrogance.
Hey, the wages they're on, they all feel like they are. This is a problem that we're seeing now. The wage bills are so high of certain clubs. And I think that's what we're seeing. Earlier, Jack was going on about, the transfers are slowing down. It's because it's directly correlated to wage bills. And clubs like Chelsea and United.
100%.
Do you know how much?
That's a brilliant point. Absolutely brilliant point.
United with Cavani, it's getting out of hand wage bills. And apparently with Liverpool.
It's a brilliant point.
I think with Chelsea, it's not that they don't have gifted players, because obviously they do. They've got players of equality to get into the Champions League and to stay in the Champions League. I think the problem with them is that they haven't brought in any superstars, and anyone who is able to come in and say, right, I'm going to be the leader in this team, I'm going to take this team forward. They spent over 200 million in the transfer window this summer, and I've been saying all season long, I said it in the summer, they were all B-list signings. That they were not Premier League proven signings.
Thiago Silva, who was in the Champions League final, they lost. So we see it as
Silva is maybe an exception, but
I disagree. Thiago Silva was a ball signing. They're spending God knows how much a week on his wages. He's 35, 36 years old. What do they expect him to do? Come in and hit the ground running straight away? No.
A lot of teams are doing this. United, they've brought in Cavani because he has the experience. And
but Cavani, the difference is Cavani's performing. Cavani is actually playing really well. Cavani is playing really, really well.
Yeah, and he is younger.
His last few fixtures, and he is playing well. I wish Thiago was playing as well as Thiago fucking Silva was for Chelsea. That's it, you know. I mean, Thiago, honestly, he is getting there. You know, and I see that more than I do with Thiago. So that's why I'm concerned as a Liverpool fan.
I mean, but as a Chelsea fan, or even if he is good, he's only going to be good for a season, maybe 2 at push. He's not going to be.
Precisely. Thank you, Jack. That's the point. That's the point.
The mentality that you bring in those 2 years, he has a winning mentality. These young Mason Mount doesn't know how to even spell, probably, you know, things like that. Bringing in Thiago,
right. But it's all well and good. It's all well and good having winning mentality. If you're bringing in one player who's got winning mentality and the rest of the squad don't have it, it makes no difference.
Like Willian,
the manager did not have winning mentality.
I think a lot of it as well is
the manager did not have winning mentality.
If we talk about the great captains of teams, there's 2 sorts. You get the sorts like the Puyols, for instance, they're like warriors, you know, and they'll lift your team up. But also, it's very useful to have a captain who, more like Iniesta was later with Barcelona, who it's not so much they're loud or that they'll be like, come on, we got to lift ourselves up. It's more that they lead through example on the pitch. And I think that Chelsea don't have a player that's capable of doing that. I don't think a centre-back is the best position to do that, because you need someone in the middle of the pitch to pick up the ball and go forward. And that's what Chelsea lack, from what I see.
I 100% agree. 100%. I mean, yeah. I mean, you would have thought perhaps maybe as a captain, someone perhaps like Kante, but I just don't see Kante being kind of, as a character, very focal enough to kind of bring his team forward. I know you brought up about the high likes of Iniesta so you would ideally want, I think, as a captain, like an attacking midfield player, like the likes of Frank Lampard. Or
it depends on the team. It entirely depends on the team. If you have a team that has quality elsewhere, but you don't, like, psychologically you're unable to get over hurdles, which, I mean, I hate to keep using Barcelona examples, but the Barcelona team right now is a great example. Psychological issues are the problem. Then you want someone who's more like the Puyol figure that I said about, a warrior, someone who's able to pick you up. And less the silent spurt, they'll do it through the football sort of lead they have, which is messy. But if you've got a team where it's the lack of quality, like your team, you need someone who to
players in the face. It's a great example.
But like a team like Chelsea, it's not that they necessarily have that problem. Their problem is that they lack someone who, when they need someone to score a goal, they need that creativity. I mean, for all his faults, they had Eden Hazard, and they let him go, and they havenn't been able to replace him.
But here's my issue: how can a player at centre back kind of communicate as well with the front line? I mean,
can we just agree on one thing while we're talking about captains? Can the 4 of us agree on one thing? A goalkeeper should not be captain.
Yes, we can agree on that. That is obvious.
I think that goalkeepers can work very well as captains, but it depends on the team. I think if you have a team that is very, very good, but you need a leadership figure, the goalkeeper can be great. Iker Casillas is a great example of this.
Is Neuer?
Neuer.
I completely disagree, because even on the training,
Neuer is captain for Bayern Munich.
Train separately away from the players. They don't have the same level of an intimate relationship.
They do, precisely.
So it's just not the same. And just for the practicality of being on the pitch, that's why I would always prefer a centre midfield player as captain.
This is why I say it depends on the team. But I mean, if you have already a great team, but you just need someone to pick it up, then your Casillas, your Neuer, your Buffon, these are the guys who have so much experience that it bleeds over to the team, regardless of whether or not they train separately.
I think that's an exception. Like you said, Jack, when you've got a world-class goalkeeper like that, it's a bit of an exception. But when you have Arsenal a few years ago making Petr Cech their captain, I mean, come on, what the fuck is that? What is that? And Spurs, the
difference between Arsenal and Bayern Munich or Real Madrid, for instance, is that Arsenal, the team just isn't world class, and so
it's a different
context there.
But even still, just a general, just personal relationship that a captain should have with their players. Clearly, a goalkeeper just won't have that because when they go to the training pitch, they train completely separately.
100%. They do. They have their own coach. They have a separate coach. They train on a different part of the pitch.
Yeah, the only time they really see each other, I guess, is lunch breaks or on the team coach. And I know it's the captain's job to go around picking up fines. If, say, for example, Hugo Lloris goes to, say, Dele Alli and wants a £10,000 fine, Dele Alli's going to be like, well, who are you?
So basically, I think certain clubs kind of use the captaincy to retain players. And I think it's kind of a bit...
it doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't. No.
Salah is apparently
I agree.
And he wants captain a lot more. And it's like, I don't know. It's interesting.
I mean, that's one of the worst case scenarios, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're so desperate for a player to stay that you're going, come on, stay, we'll make you the captain.
But there are so many examples of it. I mean, Arsenal, they did it with Ozil when he first signed his new contract a couple of years ago. They made him captain. Didn't work. It doesn't work. If you're literally keeping a player to ransom just by making him captain, doesn't work.
Yeah, and also kind of just, I think we learned, for example, when Paul Pogba was made the vice captain of Man United, and Mourinho, I reckon, was wise to take it away from him because you need the character of being captain as well.
Probably the shock of the round would be Southampton beating Arsenal by 1-0. Henry, I believe you covered this match.
Well, first thing I will say, mate, is if you've been watching Arsenal this season, it's not a shock. Yeah, it was a strange one because, I mean, going into the game, the team selection straight away, Arsenal rotated heavily. Southampton played with full strength 11. You could see you wanted it more. And it showed on the pitch. I mean, Arsenal, for the first 65, 70 minutes, they weren't in the game at all. I mean, it was literally all Southampton. I mean, we were lucky to lose the game 1-0. I think the goal was it was poor to concede from an Arsenal perspective. It was a cross that came in from the right. Defender sticks a foot out of it, goes under the keeper into the back of the net. I think Leno played well. I think a few players played well, but I think on the whole, I mean, the front four, there are certain things I'd like to say. I mean, Willian, I could sit here and talk for the next half an hour on Willian and what a waste of money he is and what a terrible signing he is. And I think he was genuinely, you can sit there, you can slate Ryan Brewster for Sheffield United, you can sit there and slate Werner Havertz for Chelsea, but Willian was the worst signing that was made this summer. He has been absolutely terrible every time he's worn an Arsenal kit.
As much as
every time he started for Arsenal, we've lost.
It was a Gabriel home goal that led to the Southampton victory. So, is there problems in the back line?
Doesn't matter. Gabriel's been out for a month. Gabriel's been out for a month with COVID, right? I wasn't expecting him to sit there and have a performance like Pablo Maldini. You know, I wasn't expecting him to be the next, Sergio Ramos. It's the same with Salah. I think a lot of players who have had COVID come back and they're inconsistent.
Long COVID is a big
I agree. I mean, Sam Maximan, he's been out for 2 months in Newcastle with COVID. He's only just come back at the weekend. I think it affects players. But anyway, that's by the by. Nicola Pepe. Let's talk about Nicola Pepe.
72
million pounds. 72 million pounds for Nicola Pepe. Right. And I tell you what, he had one good season in Liga. One good season. 72 million pounds, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. But there was nothing this season and last that has proven he's worth even a fraction of that price. Okay? I remember how happy we all were. We were like, yeah, he's brilliant, he's world class. A lot of Arsenal fans said that. None of us had seen him play. I'll admit I was one of those fans because I thought, we're spending £72 million on a player. He must be brilliant. Arsenal never spend money on players. Jesus Christ. I tell you what, he could not dribble past a toddler. That's how bad this player is, right? And I'm not joking. I have to watch him week in, week out. He is terrible.
Last season, they made the memes of like Pepe.
Yeah, he was
the only person.
He was poor last season. It was poor losses. I mean, against Dundalk this season, Pepe struggled to have a good game against Dundalk. And no disrespect to Dundalk, but I mean, come on, it's Dundalk. They're playing the Irish, Premier League.
I would have thought, with the Europa League, you can blow people out of the water. But actually...
Well, we have done that. We have done that. I mean, we won all of our games in the group stage. I'm not going to sit there and say that's an achievement. We played poor opposition. And I think Benfica, when we play them next month, I think that's going to be a real test. I don't see us going through.
100%.
I don't see us going through. And that is why I think I myself am so annoyed at Arteta's team selection. Because I think the FA Cup was the only trophy we could win this season. And Arteta's gone, no, do you know what? Done that. We'll focus on the league. We're 10th. Does he not realise we're 10th? We've got no chance of qualifying for Europe in the league. Villa are a couple of points behind us. They've got 3 games in hand. Exactly. That's where we are now. We are competing with Aston Villa and Leeds at mid-table. We're not a top 4 club. And I think the sooner certain people at this football club realise that, the better.
What needs to change?
I don't think they'll ever admit it, because then their pool becomes skewed. I think there's a lot of reasons they'd never, they want to appear big, they want to appear as though they're a desirable club to come to. I think that there'll never be an internal sort of acknowledgement. But obviously, Henry has more on that.
One question.
Like you say, Jack, what needs to change? I mean, I think, like Charlie says, there's a certain mentality from this football club that we don't have at the moment. We don't have a winning mentality at the moment. I mean, we won the FA Cup last year. We got lucky. That kept Arteta in a job. Arteta wouldn't be in this job now if he didn't win the FA Cup. I think it pains me to say this, and I'm saying this, I'm putting this out there for everyone to see. I genuinely think Mikel Arteta is out of his depth. Okay? I am not saying I do not think he will become a good manager. I think he will. I think he will become a good manager. I think, you don't get to sit there and learn under Pep for 3 years if you're not, have the potential.
I just put the
at this moment in time, I think the Arsenal job was too big for him. I think Emery, I tell you what, Emery was unfairly sacked. He's doing good. Unai Emery, I tell you what, Unai Emery is a good manager. Unai Emery is a very good manager. I think there were 2 things that let him down. I think the language barrier let him down. The language barrier and the lack of support from certain players. I think a lot of players looked at him and thought he was a clown. Good thing.
If you look at him,
well, with Emery, I think part of the problem with him is that he really made his name with 2 clubs in particular, Valencia and Sevilla, and at both of those clubs, when he was managing them, there was a lot less pressure on them because they weren't expected to necessarily win the league, because obviously you had Barcelona and Real Madrid. But, they have the finances to compete. And so it's quite it was, I mean, obviously, especially at Valencia, things have changed a lot with Peter Lim taking over. But it was a decent job to have. Then you went to PSG, where it's impossible to lose, really, in the league. He was humiliated in the Champions League, but PSG are always humiliated in Champions League. That doesn't change, right? So once again, there's not so much pressure. But then to go to Arsenal, I mean, there's a huge amount of pressure there. It's probably one of the most difficult jobs in Europe that you could take on, really, given the expectation and the resources that are available.
But where would you fix
your point there is spot on.
Which part of the pitch do you reckon?
What part would I fix?
Yeah, I mean, what would you say, for example, next summer? What? Because there seems to be quite a leaky defence, a front 3 that just don't appear to be scoring goals.
This is the problem. I mean, on paper, I think Arsenal as a squad aren't terrible. I think the defenders, they're not world class, but they're decent. They're good. Their midfield, on paper, it should
to have Saliba or Gabriel.
And their front 3. I mean, Aubameyang. I don't know what's happened with him this season. Obviously, there's been news in the last couple of days that there are a couple of personal issues he's got going on. I wish him well, and I hope he gets through them. And I don't know if that's had an effect on his performance. But He's been a shadow of the player we've seen this season. And I think that links into one thing. Arsenal, as a football club, have a habit of giving players big contracts. And the minute those players get those big contracts, they don't care. They don't care. It's happened with Aubameyang. It happened with Ozil. It happened to a certain degree with Sanchez.
For a lot of clubs, they're paying for the pay. They're not paying for the badge anymore.
Mercenaries, that's what they are, mercenaries. And I think you're right. A lot of clubs do have them now. I think there are a few clubs in the Premier League that don't. I mean, Fulham are a perfect example. They don't have players who are influenced by money. I think a poor start to the season. I look at Fulham now. I think Fulham are going to stay up.
Yeah, true. They're playing quite good football. And I think even clubs like Villa, the wage bill, there's ego. I think there's some, like, Grealish is playing.
Villa are a perfect example. Yeah, precisely. Villa are a perfect example. Absolutely perfect example.
Well,
they're a brilliant example. Well, I just think there are a lot of things wrong at Arsenal, on and off the pitch.
Well, as to attempting to rebuild Arsenal, it's obviously something that's going to take a lot of time, probably a lot of transfers. But this window, it looks like Arsenal are going to sign Martin Odegaard on loan. To me, this doesn't make any sense, to be honest.
Yes.
Because Arsenal surely don't need another aggressive attacking midfielder. And Real Madrid, it also doesn't make much sense for them because they don't really have much depth in midfield either. They have, I think, 5, maybe 6 midfielders total. If we think Casemiro, Modric, Kroos, your typical 3. Fede Valverde, who's young and still being brought up. Isco, and Odegaard. So to me, it makes no sense for Madrid to let him out on loan. And I mean, Henry, you'll be able to tell us a lot better, but it doesn't seem like Arsenal needs him either, as good as he is.
I disagree. I think ever since Ozil has found himself out of the team, what we have been lacking is an attacking midfielder, a creative number 10. I think I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm an expert on Odegaard. I mean, I know he was fantastic when he played for Real Sociedad. I know he was brilliant for them. I know there were a lot of expectation when he returned to Madrid in his loan. I know he hasn't quite hit that ceiling. But I think he's exactly what we need. It's a low-risk transfer in a position where I think we're crying out for players. If he does well, then we can sit down with Madrid in the summer, review it, purchase him, extend the loan. If it doesn't go well, we can say, okay, we paid for you the amount of money we were going to be paying Socrates for the rest of his contract, and that's cancelled that. So I don't think that there's a real... I think it's a low-risk transfer. And I tell you what, I think I've been very critical of Edu, our director of football. I think this window, I think he's done a fantastic job. I mean, he's already cancelled Socrates' contract and Ozil's. They're gone. That's 6 months of wages we'd have been paying to them. That's over £5 million. He's looking at cancelling Mustafi's contract. I think if we can get in maybe one more player, I know we need a backup left back. If Tierney gets injured, we're screwed. I know we're looking at Bertrand from Southampton. I don't think that will come to fruition. It wouldn't be the worst signing in the world, but I don't think it will happen. I think it's a very good signing from a logistical standpoint and from a performance standpoint on the pitch.
Well, it really does say a lot about Arsenal that there are so many attack-minded options there, and yet they still need someone like Martin Odegaard to come in on loan. As to Martin Odegaard's quality, having watched a bit more of him than everyone else perhaps, yes, he was excellent at Real Sociedad. I wouldn't be put off by him right now at Real Madrid, partly because of the way Zidane is. If there was one major fault with Zidane, the one thing that you'd really criticise him for, it's his inability to really introduce youth players. I mean, he's done all right with Fede Valverde, to his credit, although Valverde is a phenomenal player, so maybe it's nothing to do with Zidane at all. But Zidane really, he has his key squad of veterans who he gets on with, and this is where he's really good, because it takes someone that is really respectable to control that sort of dressing room, and that's where he's succeeded. But with the fringe players, he's really struggled. So with Isco, for instance, he's had a lot of problems. With Gareth Bale, he famously had a lot of problems. And with Martin Odegaard, I think that Zidane just for some reason just doesn't trust him, won't play him as much as he perhaps deserves to be played. And this is why he's potentially being released.
You think with your recent acquisition of Brighton's keeper, what do you make of that?
Do you know what, mate? I saw a lot of Arsenal fans are underwhelmed by it. I am very happy with it. I mean, our keeper before him, Ramsson, we've only seen him play a couple of games. But he's pony. He's not good enough for the Premier League. He's not good enough to be a second choice keeper in the Premier League. He wasn't even first choice for a team that battled relegation in League One. Do you know what I mean? I'm talking about French League One. League One, I should say.
Yeah.
And Ryan, I know he's been out of the Brighton team for a month. I saw a lot of people saying, he's been dropped by Brighton, making it sound like he's not played a first team game for Brighton in 2 years. Up until a month ago, he was their first choice keeper for 3.5 years. I don't think you can sit there and say it's not a good signing.
No,
Premier League proven, it's a backup. He's not a first choice, he's a backup. And I think, considering there haven't been many signings this window, there haven't, who's really signed anyone so far? I'm struggling. I'm probably missing a really obvious one here, but I'm struggling to think of
there's not been any. Now that you
big
mentioned
signing off the top of my head.
No one wants to spend. I think
that's true.
I think a lot of it is that combination of COVID, but also the fact that over the past few years we've had among the big clubs suddenly this urge to spend hundreds of millions. There was this after the Pogba transfer. There was this sudden inflation in prices. And in part, it's all linked in that. So, for instance, PSG brought Neymar for 222 million, and then suddenly everyone knew that Barcelona had this money, and so they went and signed Dembele, Coutinho, and Griezmann, all of them for over 100 million euros. And you're seeing it all around. Every time someone buys someone for X amount, the club that then gets the money, suddenly all of their prices inflate. When they're trying to buy players. So suddenly there's a lot of clubs who are spending quite recklessly. And I think we're getting a bit of a reaction to this. A lot of people going,
for sure.
Maybe we have been spending too much. And then suddenly COVID hits. The biggest revenues for a lot of clubs are the fans coming into the stadiums. In a lot of cases, you see this with Barcelona. Their museum gets millions each year. And that's been closed because people can't go to it. And so you're getting these repercussions, not just with this inflation, but also with the loss of income. And so I think that's why we're not seeing many signings this winter transfer window.
Yeah, and it's also, I reckon, that more and more teams are kind of fashioning onto the fact that there just tends to be, it does tend to be cost more in general for the winter transfer market. And I think more and more teams have directors of football now, and they want to be more
negotiation. Because it's only a month, so they try and drag them out, and then they know that the teams are trying to, to hype things up. It's definitely a different sort.
Another point of it, like Jack just mentioned there, because they know it's the January transfer window, they know if certain clubs who are struggling want to buy one of the players, you can charge them more because they're going to need that player more, right? Than if they bought them in the summer.
So they'll refuse offers, that if they got in the summer, they'll be like, yes. And as I say, and then they'll make them sort of, bleed them out almost a little bit and make them sort of. So I think that's the thing is a lot of clubs are trying to negotiate, but walking away because there's resistance and they're just, they want cheap deals. Maybe bids are lower. Mate, I think there's a little bit of people are trying to be really smart, but everybody wants the money. So it's difficult. It's difficult.
So, Henry, if you had to summarise Mesut Ozil's Arsenal career in one sentence, how would you do that?
That is a really good question. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, one sentence is hard, but a lot of promise, but promise that was never fulfilled. I think that's all that can really be said. I mean, he didn't have very good strikers to play behind during his time at Arsenal. I mean,
with
I don't want to put any disrespect on Olivier Giroud's name, but yeah, I mean, if he was playing behind someone like peak prime Mesut Ozil kind of.
That was the season before I really got into football, and people always said, Arsenal, it should have been Arsenal instead of Leicester, but it was just the Giroud.
I mean, I remember, I remember the season Leicester beat us in the title race. And I'll tell you what, the best thing Mesut Ozil ever did, we played Leicester. We beat them 2-1, a Danny Welbeck 90th minute winner. header in stoppage time. And Ozil's ball in was phenomenal. And I just thought to myself, that's it, we're going to win the league. We're actually going to win the fucking league. Didn't happen. We bottled it towards the end of the season. I mean, Ozil was fantastic that season. He was our best player by a country mile.
Wasn't he player of the year? It was big. He was good then.
He was fantastic. He was phenomenal. And I mean, he's 32 now. Let's be real. I mean, age catches up with everyone. I mean, there are a few exceptions.
FIFA Player of the Year squad. I didn't mean that he was like Ballon d'Or, or I just meant that in FIFA he was
in the team of the year. He was in the best 11. I mean, and it's like I said. I know age isn't as big of a factor as it was. I mean, you look at how well the top athletes are extending their career. I think Ronaldo, I mean, he's obviously.
Yeah. It's getting there, you know.
I agree, but I think on the whole, like you say, Jack, I think his Arsenal career was promising, but he never quite reached the heights many Arsenal fans expected him to.
And the last of the English teams for us to cover are Manchester City, who beat Cheltenham in the FA Cup by 3-1. Pinfold, what is City like this season? They had a bit of a rough start, but things seem to be going a bit better now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, that kind of does show the character in the team. I think for a while they've had quite a few injury problems. I mean, both Aguero and Jesus have up front both had injury issues, and at times tried to chop and change with either Ferran Torres or Raheem Sterling up front, but they somehow managed. And I think, like I said, with the character of the teams, that when they're down, they've been able to really pick themselves up again. But I do reckon they could, face another tricky patch again. We've heard that De Bruyne is going to be out for now 6 weeks against.
Well, I disagree.
Against in the FA Cup, they just about managed to win 3-1. I know 3-1 is a good score line, but it's against a League 2 team that took just to pass the 80th minute for them to score. And we just really need to wait and see that game wasn't just a blip, and perhaps it's not something of a new bad trend for them. But one player that has really impressed me this season has been, of course, the resurgence of John Stones. I think for a while, many people had kind of thought he was a spent force. There's a lot of rumours going around that he would return back to Everton at the end of last season. Even Otamendi was getting picked ahead of him. But somehow, just through sheer audacity, working hard, training hard, and when he got his chance, he took it and he's performed solid all the time. I believe you actually can see this something like 1 goal since he started for them, and it's incredible.
Do you think City are favourites to win the league?
Absolutely at the moment. Their squad quality is incredible, even with De Bruyne out. And although he is, I think, their best player, with him out, I do reckon you can see the likes of either Gundogan, Gundogan, Phil Foden. You also got Bernardo Silva. Each can play in that similar role. And they just got so many creative options all across the pitch that I would imagine, despite the fact he's such a world-class player, there's always someone to fill in the boots.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me that City's problems have reversed almost, in that at the start of the season, I think in particular that Leicester game, we were thinking their defence is shocking. They really need to do something here. But then, as you say, John Stones has really picked himself up, and now their defence is absolutely solid, but sometimes it seems like they have trouble trying to score goals.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's what I touched on with the injury of Jesus or Aguero again. Usually one of them injured wouldn't be too much of an issue, but to have both strikers out injured is just really bad luck. And but I do reckon as soon as one of them becomes back again, or both of them, they should be even better than they are, and considering the kind of winning streak they're on at the moment, I do reckon they're the favourite.
Coming on from what you said there, Jack, I mean, I think your point about the strikers is, somewhat correct, but I think they've been perfectly fine without Aguero this season. I mean, he's only played 9 times, he's only scored twice. I think they are a force that, like you said, defensively, that was their main issue, and they've sorted with that. I don't know where this resurgence of John Stones has come from, but he has been fantastic. He's England's best centre-back. He needs to be number
one. I saw an interview, actually, and he said that he had to dig deep. He said that he went back to the drawing board, and it was a really humble interview from John Stones, who he's at Everton, he's been at City, so by no means should I like this guy, but he was very charismatic, and I thought, you know what, I actually really
I think he comes
resonate with
across
what
that
he's
way.
saying. Do you know what?
Yeah,
and he went.
I agree. I think he comes across that way.
He dig deep, and he's actually phenomenal now. And it's like, you know, he really has gone back to the drawing board and gone back to the basics, as he said in the interview. And I'll try and find it. But yeah, it's phenomenal. You know, the players can do.
I remember quite well with John Stones that when he came back to Everton, I think one of the first things he did after the game was he went and saw the team behind the scenes. You know, and that, you know, I mean, of Everton, of course, because, you know, obviously he missed them, and that kind of shows the kind of character he is, how he could get along so well with so many people. Just
was this at Goodison? What when City played, he went into the change room? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I think this was about when he first came back. So I think that could have actually been when Everton beat City 4-0. But yeah, I remember.
When was that? I don't seem to remember that fixture.
That was, I think 2017. That was Pep's first season.
He has to go back.
One thing that can be said about City as well.
He has to go back quite far to get the old.
Charlie, I beg you, please.
The old W.
That is when the event happened that John Stones took the picture with the backroom staff at Goodison.
I think the key thing for City is as well, Ruben Diaz. I mean, no one thought anything of it when they signed him. No one sat there and went, "Oh, that's a signing that's going to set the world alight." But I mean, what a signing he's been. What a signing he's been. I think he has been the best signing of the summer. Personally, I think he has marshalled that City defence. He is the most reliable centre-back they've had since... God knows. I mean, honestly, he's a fantastic player. He's so young as well. He's only 22, 23.
Company. He's the new company.
Since the flea fit company.
Well,
I wouldn't go that far, but I think he's been the best defensive signing they've made.
So, Charlie, how far do you think City can go this season?
Do you know what? And this is bad. I think with the composure, with their current form, I think they'll win it. And I think that I'd rather they win the league than United. And I think that you know, centre back partnership that has just been established, they're not gonna let up now. They're not gonna drop points, and I think they're actually gonna be the ones that win the league. Personally, what does everyone else think on that? I mean, United are gonna slip up at some point.
I agree. I agree.
City again, and I can't argue with that because it is phenomenal football. You know, under Guardiola's tutelage, I think that Cancelo as well. No one's mentioned that. He is absolutely evolved, and their entire back line is phenomenal.
Yeah. But that's another one. That's another one they signed from Benfica.
Yeah, he is. It took him some time in the Prem to really tick, but he is probably one of the best.
Thing is,
look said about it, and I think he's absolutely phenomenal.
Look at a lot of Man City signings. They've been from Benfica, and all of them, you know, maybe one or two have been fantastic signings.
Obscure teams, yeah.
They've been really good signings.
Okay, so moving away from the Premier League and the FA Cup, the Bundesliga had some interesting results with some potential repercussions on the title race this weekend. Henry, I believe you watched Borussia Mönchengladbach beat Borussia Dortmund 4-2.
Yeah, I watched that Friday night, and it was a really, really good game of football. I mean, coming into it from the outset, both teams are fighting for Champions League football. I wouldn't say they're fighting for the title. And I wanted to keep an eye on a couple of players that Dortmund had in their team. You know, obviously Jadon Sancho, Jude Bellingham, fantastic player. We'll talk about him more in a minute. But I thought, you know, this would be a relatively even game. But I mean, the scene was set within the first few minutes. I mean, Borussia Mönchengladbach had a goal disallowed within the first minute, you know, and that kind of sets the scene for the rest of the game. And bar the two goals Dortmund scored, they didn't have any chances. And they were so flat, they were so lifeless. I think both teams defended incredibly poorly, and the standard of defending was shocking. You know, Mönchengladbach deserved the win. They won 4-2. They deserved the win. And I tell you what, Dortmund, I mean, they sacked Lucien Favre a couple of weeks ago. They're under a new caretaker manager at the moment. They've not been playing very well. They've really not. I struggle to see them qualifying for the Champions League this season. I really do. I mean,
because I think when you look at players who scored the 2 goals for them, and you don't get the win, they've got to be left dissatisfied. They've got to be left unhappy because it's like at that point, if you score 2 goals, what is the rest of the team doing? And it's difficult. And I think there are a few outliers with Dortmund, Sancho, Bellingham, Haaland, that are doing the work. Maybe even Hazard's brother plays in the midfield. You know, incredible.
There were 4 players. There were 4 players who played really well for Dortmund. I mean, Julian Brandt, he was really good. We've been linked with him. Yeah. We've been linked with him. I wouldn't mind having him at Arsenal, but he won't leave Dortmund. He was really good. Jude Bellingham, 17 years old, and he was probably one of the most mature players in that Dortmund midfield. He was phenomenal. He was really
They're amazing developing, players, and I think that people know that now.
You wouldn't have thought it'd come from the Championship. No, he'd come from a team that a mid-table team in the Championship in Birmingham, and now he's playing, Bundesliga football, top-level Bundesliga.
They knew that. Scout. I think that the system
one of their best players.
Via metrics, they're using statistics and metrics to recruit people, and I think they see that now. I think we're going to see more recruitment based on
that. Sorry,
should be.
What kind of midfielder is he though? What would you say he marks up? How does he play?
He's creative.
I'd say he's a box to box. I'd say he's a box to box midfielder. He's very energetic. He's very good on the ball. He likes to have the bball a lot. He likes to have the ball at his feet. He looks up when he has the ball. And he doesn't dally on it. When he's got the ball, he wants to play it forward. He doesn't want to sit there, your Kovacic's, your Jorginho's. He doesn't want to play the ball sideways or backwards. He's always head up. He wants to play the ball forward. He wants to see what he can do. He's got Sancho and Brandt on the wings. He's always trying to make that forward pass. And I tell you what, I can see him. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would not be opposed to him being on the plane for Southgate squad in the Euros this summer. I mean, he's a really good talent. He's mature beyond his years. He's a very good player. And Sancho,
17.
I'll have a quick word about Sancho as well. I mean, Sancho hasn't had an amazing season. I think a lot of the speculation. Yeah, he was injured, and I think a lot of the
he's trying to
the speculation. A lot of the speculation that linked him with United kind of put him off his game a little bit. I'm not personally sure he wanted to move to United because at the time I don't think he saw United as a step up.
No, it isn't.
But I still think it affected his game a little bit. But Friday, I should say, he was phenomenal. And I think if it wasn't for Dortmund's defence, they could have won the game. But Borussia Gladbach wanted it more. They've got a fantastic player, Lars Stindl. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's their captain. He's a fantastic player. He's a really, really good player. I mean, he plays as a false 9 for them.
The City. Do you think that they'll give City trouble in that's the next fixture in the Champions League?
Let's not forget that they gave Real Madrid trouble.
Yeah, they did. They did.
Yeah, I really think they will give City a game. I really think they do. I'm not saying that they'll necessarily go and beat City over 2 legs. I think they'll give City a game.
Pep tends to overthink fixtures like that, so I could see it being lopsided. Yeah. Honestly, Pep tends to overthink those type of fixtures. So genuinely, I could see Gladbach in there.
It's really interesting. It's really, really, really interesting in Mönchengladbach this season in Champions League because they've been in the Champions League a lot, obviously, but they've really struggled to get out of the group stage. They, when they were drawn in the group this season, they had Shakhtar Donetsk and they had Real Madrid in
the group of death.
Which is, I mean, there were a few groups of death, but it was one of them, yeah. And so this was really difficult, and they still managed to get out, and they beat Real Madrid, it wasn't a shock result. It was a very comfortable game in their favour, and so like they can definitely give an upset to City. Definitely.
I hope that Pep does not overlook that. Well, I mean, as a Liverpool fan, maybe he will. But I think one of the greatest advantages we have is that we have RB Leipzig as our opponent in the. He won't overlook that. Klopp knows, and I think maybe Pep will overlook Gladbach.
I disagree. I think
a huge thing.
I mean, I think talking about the Champions League.
It's funny when Arsenal.
I think talking about the Champions League is a different topic for a different podcast.
That conversation.
So there's a lot of positives for Borussia Mönchengladbach. Borussia Dortmund also positives, as we'd mentioned, with some of the young players, the young English talents that they have, but also a lot of negatives. They started this season really quite well. Bayern Munich dropped a lot of points. They were top of the table for a long time, but they've really capitulated since.
Yes.
As you mentioned, Henry, they sacked their coach recently. Things are looking bad. So my question to all three of you, feel free to pitch in, all of you. Who do you think has had the bigger capitulation this season? Borussia Dortmund or Chelsea?
Oh, definitely.
That's a very good question. I think Chelsea. Yeah, I think Chelsea.
Dortmund
I think Chelsea...
Purely, I reckon Borussia Dortmund...
With the money...
Chelsea.
No, I'm sorry. Kai Havertz and Werner have not... And I saw something the other day, and I do not like Chelsea as a club, but apparently Werner has hit the woodwork 5 times, and he's missed very narrowly 5 times. And people are saying he's the unluckiest footballer ever to be in the Premier League in his first season. And I was like, But do you know what? I think they've just capitulated. I think that Chelsea, when you watch them, it's crazy. West Bromwich Albion, 3-3. They were down that entire game. And some of their results, if you look at them, shocking. I think, honestly, if you look at the London teams right now, it's crazy. West Ham are probably the best team in London right now. How crazy is that? Who would ever say that seriously?
That's a ludicrous statement. That's an absolutely ludicrous statement. That's a ludicrous statement.
Or unbeaten.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've heard in my life.
Right now,
West Ham are the best team in London. No, ridiculous statement. Ridiculous statement. Ridiculous statement.
Who is the best team in London right now?
Best team in London right now.
We'll see on Thursday night.
Honestly,
it's clearly, I'd say...
Best team in London right now.
It's Tottenham.
Tottenham, we have...
I hate to say it, yeah, but it is Spurs.
Well, we beat them
2-1. It's Spurs. Spurs are the best team in London at the moment.
Due to 2 world-class players.
Spurs are the best team in London.
Squad. Son and Kane.
Precisely. Jack's nailed it. Jack's got it spot on.
So do you think they're title contenders? Do you think they'll beat Guardiola's City? And we've spoken so highly of Guardiola.
I don't think they're title contenders. I don't think they'll win the league. I
think they have the chance.
I think City will win the league.
Carabao final is City and Spurs. What do we reckon? Predictions. How do we see that going? Because that is the clash of these two teams then that we've been...
That game's not for 3 months' time. It's irrelevant to talk about a game that's in 3 months' time.
I understand that.
Change between now and then. I think on the basis of now...
Yeah. Who do you think now?
On current form, City are going to win it. City would win it. Look, current form, City would win it.
Throughout the entire squad, and I've said this for a while, apart from a couple of world-class players, if you look at Tottenham's midfield and their defence, it's average. It's average. But at the top of the pitch, Son and Kane are world-class.
And they're playing really well together this season.
They've got a midfielder that scored an absolute screamer, and his name escapes me.
Ndombele.
He is incredible.
But no, I mean, look, you still got... No, he's a good player, right? But you got that level up.
Fernandez,
world-class status. I'd say Son and Kane are at that world-class status, right? And that's good.
I agree. I think Son and Kane walk into any team.
Do you know what?
I think Kane does. Son, I think he'd walk into a lot of teams, not any team.
I would say he walks into the vast majority of teams.
Okay, what teams would Son not get into?
Considering his age...
I can't believe I'm sat here sticking up for a Spurs player. Jesus.
Considering his age, I don't think that he'd get into PSG. I don't think that he would get into Bayern Munich.
And what will be Spurs'
Disagree.
downfall?
I think he's better than Angel Di Maria.
So as strong as Son and Kane are, there's Gareth Bale and there's Bergwijn who are liabilities to that team. And I think that is what holds them back. And City will win. It's the history of the Tottenham. They will bottle it again because they just, other than Son and Kane, if one of them gets injured, They have no plan B. People say Liverpool have no plan B.
I mean,
They are truly in trouble if one of them gets Bergwijn hits the woodwork more than I do, mate.
In defence, Bergwijn, I mean, he is a young player, but the thing is, I reckon they're about on the level with the rest of the Tottenham team. I mean, it's just the fact that they just really are just outliers.
What do we make of Bale? He hasn't quite made the impression that I think that Spurs fans would have wanted him to. You know, I think he's another example. People are quick to point at Thiago, Gareth Bale, who they brought in, and that probably took a lot. What's he doing for Spurs? I'll hand it to someone else. You know, what do we think of Bale?
Well, he seems happy.
Well, it's no secret.
I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is with his extravagant wages and goals.
No, see, I think Gareth Bale is a player.
He's another Willian.
Controversial, I don't know.
He's another Willian,
no,
isn't he?
Gareth Bale as a player is done. He is done at the top level, in my opinion. He's done at the top.
Well, that's why he's at Spurs.
I agree.
I think you're.
The thing is, I was very anti-Spurs, but I saw the All or Nothing Amazon documentary, and it really changed my opinion. I think they could be a top club. They're missing a few bits, but the thing that was interesting about that is you get to see how they run, and obviously I don't like Daniel Levy at all, but I think it's interesting to watch.
I don't think many people do like Daniel Levy, mate. Honestly,
I think they're progressing under Jose. I think he demands a lot from players. Track back. Be critical of other players. And
they got very lucky to get him as a manager.
Yeah, under Mourinho, some players will break. You're seeing that with Dele Alli. Some players are going to flourish, and he will win a trophy with them, I think. And that's how you want that. You know,
ask a question?
Nobody wants him to do that, but I think Jose.
Come on, Henry.
And his
can I ask a question to the rest of the pod? Would you guys, right? And I'll ask each of you this individually, like including you, Jack, at Barcelona. Would you take Jose Mourinho as your manager?
No.
Yeah. Not over Klopp, but if Klopp somehow was fired, then Jose, yeah, 100%.
If you'd asked me...
So you're telling me you'd take Ronald Koeman over Jose Mourinho?
No, I don't think Ronald Koeman's enough quality to be at Barcelona either.
Who is then? What top managers in the world right now are good enough to be at Barcelona?
With Barcelona, it's a difficult one because as well as being a good manager, you need to play the right football. And if you don't, like, it doesn't matter if you're getting results, the Barcelona fans won't respect you. It's why Valverde didn't last at Barcelona. And so you need someone who not only is a good manager, but needs to play possession-based attacking football. I mean, the ideal would be Pep Guardiola, obviously, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I know, obviously, my team is Everton, but at the moment, I wouldn't take Jose Mourinho or Carlo Ancelotti.
So I'm alone in this. Then I, as much as it pains me to say this, and like I said earlier on the pod, I think Arteta has potential to be a good coach. I would right now, at this moment in time, take Jose Mourinho over Mikel Arteta.
Yeah, I would as well. I would. If that was a choice.
I think that given the position that Arsenal's in, and given how many years of, I don't want to say bad managers, but a run of unsuccessful managers, shall we say, given that it's gone on for so many years, I think that it could work at Arsenal because Arsenal are like, okay, we need drastic change. Whereas I don't think it would work at a club like Barcelona, who sure are having a difficult time now, but haven't had it sustained for a long time, and so still have those standards.
Yeah, and also, of course, when you talk about the problem with Valverde with the play style, let alone Jose Mourinho.
Yeah. I mean, Valverde, he still played possession-based attacking football, but he dared to use a 4-4-2 when he was doing it, and it cost him his job.
See, I obviously know, and I'll admit this, I know nowhere near as much about Barcelona as you do, Jack, but I thought Valverde was very, very harshly criticised by Barcelona fans. I thought he won you guys trophies. I thought he was a decent manager. I think he was unfairly hung out to dry.
Well, with Valverde, it's a difficult issue because we have the gift of hindsight and things have got a lot worse since. Although I don't think that had we not got rid of him, things would be any better. And so that's worth remembering. But with him, he started off great in that He was brought in, and the summer he was brought in, Neymar went out the door. And so instantly, that's a big problem. And so people were wondering, okay, who's going to start performing better, Neymar at PSG or Barcelona without Neymar? And Barcelona that season did very well. They almost got an invincible season. They lost one game in their title race, and it was after they'd won the title. So that was the only league game that they lost all season. It was a 5-4 defeat to Levante. It was a crazy game. So that was a decent season. They won the double, the domestic double. They won the Copa del Rey and they won the Liga. But the problem was the Champions League. And this was a consistent problem with Valverde, in that he, in the first leg against Roma, of all teams, who are not a team that should be beating Barcelona, was 4-1 up and then bottled it 3-0 away to get knocked out. So, and instantly everyone was against him after that. And from that point, you have to start doing everything right, when especially at such a demanding club. And he didn't. He only got worse from there. He never got to that same peak that he did in his first season. We all know about what happened at Anfield as well. People forget about the Copa del Rey that happened shortly after that against Valencia. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Valverde had to go. It's just, it's easy to think in hindsight, oh, maybe everyone was harsh on Valverde. I mean, admittedly, the problem was rooted deeper than him, as we've seen, but he had to go.
Okay, well, what about, obviously, this is a ridiculous question almost, but what about Quique Setien? Do you think he needed to go when he did?
I think I'm one of the few people to actually defend Quique Setien, because I think he's a fantastic manager.
He's a good man.
Quique Setien, his problem is he's always been at small clubs. So he was at Las Palmas, he was at Real Betis.
He was at Betis, wasn't it? Yeah.
Real Betis, he was phenomenal at Betis, and he was great at Las Palmas as well. In that he is a Cruyffian purist, so he played the right type of football. His biggest problem is Barcelona needed someone who could control their changing room, because the capitulations in the Champions League were psychological. It had nothing to do with quality. Right, and so they needed someone to come in and almost do what Zidane has done and slap the players around a bit and go, right, you're going to start playing well. In the big games, that is. And Quique Setien, because he'd never managed a big team, couldn't really handle that pressure. And also, he joined, and about probably only a few weeks later, COVID hits, and suddenly all the leagues are suspended. And so he doesn't even get used to the club, and he's got to go and lock himself away in his house. So he joined at the worst possible time. And also, I think that he wouldn't have lost anywhere near as badly against Bayern Munich had there been fans in the stadium. So all of these things just combined to make it impossible for him. And I will defend Quique Setien. It was just the wrong time for him.
Ter Stegen also had an injury at that time.
Ter Stegen was injured in the Bayern Munich game, yeah. But I mean, there's no excuses.
But the media, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So Charlie, Bayern Munich looked good this weekend, didn't they?
Most certainly. You know what? 4-0. It was a very dominant game. I think even if you argue with the officiating, they ran away with it. Alaba's goal in the 90th minute just put the nail on the coffin, and I think they're running away with the Bundesliga, much like Atletico are with the La Liga. And I think with Dortmund, you know, they didn't beat Gladbach, and it's just the void, it gets bigger. And I think that they are just absolutely the best team in Europe. Absolutely, Neuer, undoubtedly, and obviously FIFA. And I don't like to get influenced by things like that, but their team of the year sort of team had many Bayern Munich players in, and you can't dispute it.
After a difficult start to the season as well.
100%.
How do they compare to last season?
Do you know what? They've shown vulnerabilities, and I think in the Champions League, teams might look at that a bit like they are beatable, and they definitely are, but probably still undoubtedly the best team in Europe. And I think that the Bundesliga keeps giving really good fixtures, and I think that people should keep an eye on it more so than anything. But yeah, they're pulling away a little bit, and I think Leipzig aren't quite there just yet. They're definitely going to capitulate maybe in either the Champions League or the league, and I think Bayern are going to, they're definitely going to take it, and it's just a matter of time. I think you look at the quality, if you watch that game, they are that good. They are reigning champions, and they're going to prove why they are. And Lewandowski, absolutely incredible. You look at any part of their team, and it is absolutely there.
Pinfold, you'd agree?
Well, it's always going to be difficult for them to replicate what they did last season. They were just absolutely phenomenal last year, and it's always going to be hard, especially with players who went through that, to try and think, oh, we need to do this again, to try and go again, and this is why you quite often see teams just from great seasons just not be able to replicate that. But yeah, they at the moment, I'd say they are very strong favourites again. We talked about earlier about the decline in Dortmund to win the league and with the Champions League. Well, we just have to wait and see.
Okay, so moving on to La Liga, and there was some exciting games this weekend, notably Real Madrid beating Alaves 4-1. Very interesting match, mainly because Zidane wasn't there. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but Zidane has got COVID, and so he was unable to coach his team in this game. His assistant coach was there on the pitch. It was quite amusing because his assistant coach seemed to be on the phone, I assume with Zidane, getting instructions the whole time. I guess Zidane was watching it on TV.
Of West Ham when David Moyes was isolating, there's like memes of the assistant coach there, and I think they got a big win, and they were like, oh, they're just it's like more. There was a meme about Moyes being a better manager when he had COVID, almost. But it's kind of similar, but maybe not quite.
Yeah, and despite not having Zidane, they did really well. It's funny that I was speaking earlier on about how Zidane, he has his problems with a lot of the fringe players. The season that Madrid won the league, I mean, not last season with COVID, but in 2017, the way that they won it was before big Champions League games, they wouldn't play their main squad. So they wouldn't play their Ronaldo, their Benzema, their Kroos, their Casemiro, their Modric, players like that. They'd rest them. And instead they'd play their fringe players, their Asensio, their Isco. Varane would play a lot. And this seemed to work despite Zidane not being comfortable with them, because he would often just let his assistant manager be in charge of these games. And so I guess with these smaller games that Zidane sometimes struggles with, as we saw with Real Madrid going out to Alcoy in the Copa del Rey earlier on this week.
With Shakhtar. Jeez, giving them a run for their money in the Champions League.
With these smaller games, maybe it's better for Zidane to let his assistant manager pick the squad.
100%. And I think we're seeing the same thing with Guardiola. He maybe overlooks the small games, and it's crazy to think that a manager that is operating on that sort of capacity is unable to. I think with small teams, maybe there's a bit of a boost in that they can do it, they can edge it. And I think that, what do you think it is that is, if there are any factors that maybe make it sort of easier for teams like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Pep's a very different case. I think that he just overthinks things in the Champions League, and I mean, he's done pretty well in the Premier League up until recently, and we've been saying on this, then he's potentially favourite to win again this season. With Zidane, I think it's just that what he does well, he does really well, but it's a very limited capacity. So what he does really well is that he is able to move into a team like Madrid and be respected because of what he did as a player at the club. He has that gravitas. And as a result, if your problem is, as Madrid we saw under Rafa Benitez, this was an issue. If the problem is that the dressing room has too much power, they don't respect the manager, Zidane is the perfect person to bring in. But his problem is that he's able to boost players up when it matters. Champions League final, great, you want Zidane and you want Real Madrid, and that's why they were able to win 3 in a row, precisely because of this. But it means that when he has to rotate players, he doesn't do so well, because there isn't that same level of mutual respect, because it isn't the same mindset with a lot of these players. And so it's an issue with him not being able to play his first squad every single game, and as a result, when he does have to rotate, which tends to be against smaller teams, him struggling.
I think with Madrid, they've had a lot of troubles with maybe Vinicius, and maybe even if you look at Luka Jovic, their recent signings just are not there. They are not Ronaldo. They are not Gareth Bale. They're nowhere near. What do you make of Luka Jovic? He has been back at Frankfurt for probably, I think I saw 72 minutes, and he's got 3 goals. He didn't even manage that in his entire time at Real Madrid. What do you think? Do you think that is a side effect of something? What do you make of that?
We forget with a lot of these players that they are human, And I think that we saw a very similar thing with Andre Gomes at Barcelona. Sometimes a player will go to a club and it will just be some simple reason, a change in lifestyle that they just won't get accustomed to, and it will cause their whole season to go off. With Andre Gomes, it was that he hated living in Barcelona. He felt like he couldn't walk outside his house without being criticised, and it affected his form. Luka Jovic, I think it doesn't help that he's had various scandals with the press, with local papers in Madrid and things. I reckon all this played on him, as well as the pressure of going to a club of Madrid's stature, as you say, after Ronaldo has left as well. Not that he was ever a Ronaldo replacement.
It's a very tall order, and I think that's the thing, is the media, and maybe even if you're going there is that expectation, and you can't escape that. And I think, yeah, of course, it is very grueling. You even look at Benzema; he is struggling, and they've relied upon him. But sometimes he doesn't pull up now. He doesn't pull trumps. He doesn't do it. He's not performing when they need him to. And it's very interesting because I've seen some Benzema slander, and it's like, are you serious? He's been probably even better than Ronaldo at the club. And it's crazy to see that.
Benzema, I think it's safe to say he's been the player of the season this season in the Liga. Messi, you can often throw up there, but he's missed a lot of games. He had injuries earlier on this season. He's been suspended the past game. And I mean, it's not that he hasn't been himself, because he, up until his suspension, was top scorer. He's up there on the assist charts as well. But the way that Benzema stepped up, it's undeniable that he's been certainly Real Madrid's player of the season, if not La Liga's player of the season. I think with Benzema, I'd be surprised if anyone would criticise him in his current form. I can understand criticising him when Ronaldo was at the club, because I felt like he struggled to play with Ronaldo sometimes.
I think with Madrid fans, they're so critical.
Of course,
it's almost like a negative thing. I don't know if other Jack wants to interject at all. But yeah, I think that's the thing. They're so critical of players that I think even it gets to the players.
Well, another player that we haven't spoken about, which fits in with this game, and Alaves, one of the players who did really well, he didn't assist, but he was kind of indirectly involved with setting up one of the goals and scored another one of the goals, is Eden Hazard. And he's really struggled to fit in at Real Madrid. It's admittedly, it's a lot of his issues have been injury related, and so we can't be too critical with that. And he had these injuries at Chelsea, lest we not forget. But I mean, he performed well this weekend, and I'm not saying that he's going to start playing well as of now, but it's positive signs. In a game that in perhaps any other season might be interesting, though of course with Peter Lim is less so, Atletico Madrid beat Valencia 3-1. I mean, with Atletico, there's not much to say about this other than it's the same old Atletico that we've seen all season. In that, despite the scoreline, it wasn't necessarily comfortable.
I disagree. I think Luis Suarez is still at the top. I think Simeone, as much as obviously they knocked us out of the Champions League last season, and as much as I despise the way they play, it is meticulous. I think they have a strategy, and I think they're pulling away a little bit. I know as a Barcelona fan that's difficult, but I think they are. 7 points is quite a lead, especially in such a competitive league. How do you feel? Obviously, Messi's coming back from his ban. Do you think you can make that ground up? How do you feel that it's going to play out? Obviously, you have the hindsight of knowing the intricacies of the last seasons and things like that. Do you think that they're gonna capitulate at some point?
Well, Atletico are obviously favourites, but as I say, this game really resembles their whole season, which very much resembles how Real Madrid won the title last season, in that they managed to get a win that wasn't necessarily convincing. Valencia did score. I mean, admittedly, it was a very impressive goal, but after that, Atletico Madrid did look vulnerable. And part of the problem is Luis Suarez, in that he's a phenomenal player. He was a great acquisition for them, but Diego Simeone has often said in interviews that he conditions the way that they play. Simeone likes to play defensive football, but Suarez just doesn't have the pace, especially in his age, to play on the break. And so either they need to play forward or they need to get the ball over the top to him, which can be difficult. So Atletico, even though they're scraping through wins in a way that, as I say, Real Madrid did last season. Madrid won the league last season by, in that post-COVID period, just getting 1-0 win, 2-0 win here, 2-1 win, a couple of penalties in there just to get some results in. But it's just it's how you win a title, is grinding through these results, right? So that's good. But there is a huge risk, and I don't think they'll get far in the Champions League because of this in particular. If there is a team that can dominate possession around Atletico Madrid and cut off support to Luis Suarez, then there's nothing they can do. And it's precisely what Zidane did with Real Madrid in the Madrid derby earlier on this season. They simply cut off support to Suarez, kept Atleti in their own half, and they were able to get a few goals in and win the match. So Atletico are very vulnerable. Having said that, they're definitely favourites, and they are grinding through results in a way that would make them title favourites. As to Luis Suarez, I mean, he's done phenomenally this season, obviously. He's getting those clutch goals. He's making the difference. But, I mean, when it comes to hindsight, a lot of people are quite critical of Barcelona for letting him go. I think that they were wrong to let him go on a free. But I don't think that they were wrong to get rid of him. I felt like he did need to go. And a lot of people forget this. And it's not just his wages, which are a huge part of this. It's also the fact that when he was playing, he wouldn't press, he was slow, he was lethargic, and it's okay to have one person in the team who's like this, but the problem is Messi can also be like this at times. He'll walk around, he won't press, he'll only spring into action when the ball comes near him. And that's no knock on either of the players, because obviously they're phenomenal. Messi's the best player in the history of the sport. Suarez is a phenomenal striker. But you cannot have two people in your team who are unwilling to press, who are unwilling to actively engage. And so Barcelona needed to push Suarez on. They needed to bring in fresh faces, and that's what they've done. A lot of people look at Martin Braithwaite and say, oh, you've gone from Suarez to Braithwaite. What a terrible downgrade. Martin Braithwaite is not a Suarez replacement. He was brought in as an emergency signing while Suarez was there, purely as a backup. And he's unlikely to last much longer at Barcelona, I don't think. They've got elections coming up. They've been postponed. They do have elections coming up. Laporta, who is the favourite to win, has been heavily linked with getting Haaland, for instance. And Raiola, who's Haaland's agent, is very keen on trying to give Haaland to Barcelona at a discounted price because he wants to improve his relationships with Barcelona. So, I mean, I'm not saying they will sign Haaland, but that is the sort of area they're looking for a Suarez replacement, not Martin Braithwaite. So, yeah, gift of hindsight. Suarez, great signing for Atletico Madrid. Not necessarily a bad thing that Barcelona gave him away. The only mistake was giving him away to Atletico Madrid.
Well, for me, I kind of understand what you mean with without having two players who won't press as an Everton fan. Because at the moment, one big criticism of James Rodriguez when coming to the club is the fact that defensively he is just so poor. And essentially, if Everton are not on the front foot within games or are struggling, he can kind of just disappear and not do anything. And defensively, when we're under the cosh, especially because he plays in the right wing, that area of the pitch can be quite problematic. And that's, I think, one of the reasons perhaps why Everton started becoming far more defensively solid when he became injured for quite a bit. So I think there was also a moment where Everton were linked also with Isco in the papers, right? I guess in a way it makes sense. They've got links now apparently with Real Madrid. It's another struggling club. Everton could maybe challenge for a top 4 place this season. But
I saw with the Isco stuff, I saw that as well. Yeah. I did see that.
But the reality is, I don't think that would make a lot of sense either, because at the same time, in that, if you had that in the pit, if you also had Isco, you would then have two players, neither of which have got the ability to drop back.
Also, I'd like to mention the work rate of Decore. He absolutely phenomenal, and I think you've got a good midfield now, Everton. And I hate to admit that, as City rivals, you and I, we've sat and watched many Merseyside derbies together, and I've said many expletives. As much as I say that, he knows. Henry's laughing. He knows a few things that I have said. And then James, I think your midfield is up there. It's definitely in the better percentage of the Premier League teams. I'd say definitely top half, maybe even top four. What do you think about that?
And with Suarez, it's not like he didn't get a chance. He's had the issues with the pressing, but he had about 3 seasons where he was below average, and he was given the chance. Barcelona struggled to get a replacement in many ways because of the finances related with his wage bills. And so I think it's easy for a lot of people to look at what he's doing at Atletico Madrid, which is getting these clutch goals, which is what you do to win a title, and saying, it was a bad idea to get rid of him. But I mean, he really did look like he needed to go at Barcelona.
See, the thing with Suarez is, I mean, I've obviously come into the last bit of the conversation you've had about him leaving Barcelona, and you thought, while it wasn't relatively a bad thing for Barcelona, you didn't expect it to be as good for Atleti as it was. I think with Suarez, he is a poacher. I mean, if you look at how he's played for Atletico Madrid, he hasn't exactly been tearing it up. He hasn't exactly been running around the whole pitch for 90 minutes. He knows where to be.
Do. If you look at João Felix and you think, oh, wow, his potential.
Well, Felix is a fantastic player. He's a brilliant player. He really is. He's something else.
And you think, rarely is that Atletico win by, as Jack rightly said, they're grinding out wins. They're not. It's rarely. I've never seen it go above 3. I do look at the Liga and I do see the fixtures and the scores and they've. I don't think they've broken 3 many times. I think 3 goals. That is. They might get 1 or 2-0 and that's usually what happens. So I think that there is definitely maybe an issue there, an underlying issue.
Well, can I ask you guys a question? Who do you think is going to win the Liga this season?
Atletico Madrid are favourites. They're indisputably favourites. They got 2 games in hand. On top of that, they got a 7-point gap on Real Madrid.
I think.
But this links into what Charlie was asking earlier, which is, could Atletico capitulate? And they could. As I say, they're not dominant. I mean this with all respect to Atletico Madrid, but I think in a normal season, so one unaffected by COVID, where Barcelona and Real Madrid are consistently winning, they wouldn't have a chance of winning the title on their current form.
Seeing as they breezed through Valencia, and I know you say it's closer than the scoreline shows, which would catch them out? Where are they going to...
This is what I was going to come to, right? The reason why I think they will win, is because their games in hand, had they lost those and dropped points, that's 7 points on top of Real Madrid and Barcelona. And in La Liga, it's on the head-to-head, and they have a negative head-to-head with Real Madrid, who are second. Let's imagine, so that, factoring all that into account, they still have to play Real Madrid again, they still have to play Barcelona again. And so let's assume they lose both of those, which is very plausible, very likely, especially with the glaring weakness that I just said. That's 6 points dropped, 1 point between Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. And it's fairly easy to drop 1 point somewhere in the rest of the season to go. But the reason why I think they'll win is because they haven't dropped those points in the games in hand. They keep looking uncomfortable. They have moments in the match where they're on the defensive, but they will grind through.
What did they do against those?
The game against Eibar the other day is a great example of what Atletico are doing, and it's precisely what Real Madrid did to win the title last season, which is like they won't necessarily be playing great. They went 1-0 down to Eibar, but then they got a penalty and they managed to get a last-minute Suarez goal to win the match 2-1. And that's what Atletico are this season. And so you look at that and you think they've got to drop points somewhere. And mathematically it's plausible, but they just aren't. And so that's why I think that they have to be favourites to win. I mean, obviously they are numerically, but I don't think that they're going to lose this.
Can I say that there are a couple of reasons I think Atleti will ring it. I mean, I don't follow La Liga as much as you do, Jack. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I do. I don't know anywhere near as much about it as you do. I think from an outsider looking in, I think personally Atleti will win it for a couple of reasons. I think one, they're more settled. Simeone's been there a lot longer. I know obviously Zidane's in his second spell, but I think Simeone's been there a lot longer than the other 2 coaches. He's obviously more settled there. As a team, they're more settled. I think they play better as a team than anyone else, at Madrid or Barca. Another reason is I think, like you just touched on there, they know how to win games. Like you said, Madrid did it last season under Zidane when they won the league. Atleti are doing it this season. They're getting those last-minute goals when they're not particularly playing well. And a third reason is...
and I hate to draw comparisons, it's how I feel United are getting lucky, whereas last season Liverpool would find the last-minute goal. It's almost like Atletico have...
Difference
like
with that, Charlie, though. Difference with that is, I don't think Liverpool got lucky last season. I think Liverpool were just the best team, and they played the better football over everyone else.
Oh, we can take that. That's fine.
I mean, I should add as a disclaimer, I do think that on the whole of it, Atletico Madrid are still the best team in La Liga. Because the fundamental problem with Barcelona and Real Madrid, who are, of course, second and third, is that they're just not consistent. And it's the consistency that Atletico Madrid have. Real Madrid, they'll win a game 3-0, 4-0, then they'll lose the next game. Same with Barcelona. Atletico Madrid, they'll just keep grinding out these narrow wins.
Can I ask you a question, Jack? Do you think Atletico Madrid have a chance of winning the Champions League?
No. I touched on this whilst you were gone. The reason, I'll just reiterate it, given that you're here. The reason why I don't think they'll win the Champions League is that they have a glaring weakness. And their weakness is that they rely on Suarez for goals. And Suarez can't play on the counter. And so he is, as Simeone keeps saying, he's conditioning the way Atletico are playing. He's forcing them to play further forward than they're usually comfortable with. And so the best game to highlight Atletico's weakness is the Madrid derby, where Zidane and Real Madrid just kept the ball in Atletico's half. And Atletico could do nothing about it. And it was comfortable win in the end for Real Madrid. So against a big team, they get drawn against a Bayern Munich, against Real Madrid again. I don't think that they'll win. And this is why I think that even though Atletico Madrid are by far the favourites to win La Liga this season because of the gap, because of their consistency, I think it will be closer by the end, because I do think they'll drop points against the bigger teams like Real Madrid in the league. Because there is this obvious weakness, and if you have the quality to keep the ball in their half, there's nothing they can do about it.
Well, one more thing. I know I'm not trying to take over as the host here, but obviously you're the best person to ask on Barcelona issues. Do you think Xavi will be the Barcelona manager next season?
Depends who wins the election. So the two current favourites to win the Barcelona election are Laporta, who was the president when Pep Guardiola was signed. He brought in Rijkaard back in the 2000s. Or there's Victor Font. Victor Font, he doesn't have the prestige of Laporta in that he hasn't been the president before. Laporta had all that success. But Victor Font has been working on a plan for Barcelona for the presidency for about 10 years. And this plan has managed to get Xavi behind him. So Xavi and also Puyol are both behind Victor Font. And if he wins, Xavi will almost certainly become manager instantly. I think if Laporta wins, Xavi will become manager, but it won't be yet. It will be either in the summer or maybe after that. But if Victor Font wins, then as soon as he wins the election, Koeman's out, Xavi's in.
See, I mean, I'd like to say as a football purist, I've been keeping an eye on Xavi. I know it's only Qatar, but he's got quite a decent record. You know, he's got a good record. He's obviously managing Santi Cazorla, should I say. And, you know, I've been keeping an eye on Xavi. And I think, although, like you say, I think he'll be a good Barcelona manager for the future, I don't think he's ready to take that step up yet.
Well, I mean, first on what he's doing, I mean, he's playing excellent. The football that they're playing in Al Sadd is really quality. As to whether or not he's ready, it's a difficult position to join Barcelona right now, but in many ways I think this is precisely what Xavi wants. Xavi was hesitant to join Barcelona a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago as manager, and he's been offered this position continuously under the Bartomeu presidency. And the reason why he's hesitant is, one, Bartomeu was there. Bartomeu has he's so disliked that Pep Guardiola has refused to come back whilst he's there. Xavi has refused to manage the team whilst he's there. He's gone now, thankfully. But that was his influence. Xavi didn't want to come over because he felt like he wouldn't be able to do anything under that board. And two, he didn't want a squad of old players who he couldn't control, who didn't necessarily have the athleticism or the creativity that he may want. And Barcelona have got rid of a lot of them too. They got rid of Arturo Vidal, got rid of Ivan Rakitic, got rid of Luis Suarez in the summer. Obviously, Messi's still there. But for the most part, the squad, they've brought in loads of young players. Oscar Mingueza, Ronald Araujo, Serginho Dest, Pedri, Ricky Puig, Frankie de Jong. all these young Ansu Fati, all of these young players are starters in this team now. And so I feel like this is the perfect thing for Xavi, because he can go in, much less pressure, because there isn't the expectation for this team to do what the team a season ago or a season before was expected to do with all their veterans. It's a nice fresh team for him to come and take over. So I actually think he'd like this team. So finally, with the La Liga games, Barcelona went away to Elche, where they won 2-0. This was, in one word, a very comfortable game for Barcelona, to the point where it got tiring. Elche, a lot of respect for Elche, very small club. They were relegated in 2015 for financial issues. They've just come back. They were promoted this summer. Difficult task. And when they did go forward against Barcelona, they had their moments. They were doing all the flicks, bringing out all the tricks. But the problem is that for the most of the game, they just let Barcelona have the ball. 5 men in defence. That was it. Shut up shop. End of the first half, Barcelona had over 70% possession. It just was not a challenge at all. 2-0 by the end. Barcelona went 1-0 up. That was kind of the end of the game. First half, they looked quite good, creating a lot of chances. De Jong got the goal in the end. I mean, it was an own goal, but De Jong got a foot on it just as it was going in, so it went down as a De Jong goal. That was all great. Second half, Barcelona really took their foot off the pedal. I think because they were 1-0 up and because Elche weren't bothering to go at them. And so for the next 30 minutes, it was just a dull affair. Finally, the game kicked alive, mainly because Elche finally got a chance on the break. Ter Stegen managed to save it. Ronald Koeman said, right, let's make some changes. Brought Pedri off. Pedri, who'd had a really good game. Brought Ricky Puig on, who, about a minute into being on the pitch, scored a header. And that was the end of the game. So, phenomenal game for De Jong. Great for Ricky Puig. That's his first La Liga goal. Hopefully he'll get some more starts now, because he really deserves it. But with Barcelona, it was quite a dull affair. As to what it means for them for the title race this season, I think part of the problem with Barcelona is they will win a couple of games in a row, look really good. They will then decline for whatever reason. I sometimes just have no idea what the reason is. Sometimes you figure out it's Koeman's substitutions. It's quite very difficult to say. Koeman will then drastically react. He'll change the formation. They'll start playing well again. You think, oh, he's done it. All he needs to do is change the formation. Then suddenly they will take their foot off the pedal again, decline again, change formation again. It's just this continual cycle all season. It's precisely why they've struggled. It's because they keep dipping into these ruts of just not picking up wins. He's been through a 4-2-3-1. He's had 3 at the back. He's now in a 4-3-3. Go on, Henry.
Do you think Messi is starting to decline?
No.
Controversial question, I know, but I mean, obviously, his performances in the Liga haven't been amazing recently.
Well,
the motivation thing, I think
there was
you look at the politics above them, and we obviously we're mostly Premier League supporters here. You look at the politics above them. You try and play a game when you don't even know what's going on above you. Like, could you imagine the institution that paid you? There's some serious stuff going on. And
maybe I worded that wrong. Maybe he hasn't started to decline, but do you not think he's starting to be more and more convinced that Barcelona isn't the place for him anymore?
Well, they're two different questions. I'll start with the first one because it is worth mentioning some things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Messi, he's not as young as he was. When he was young, he used to be very dynamic. He'd pick up the ball, take on as many players as he could. And whilst he still does, he has a phenomenal dribbling rate. He is more of a reserved kind of attacking midfielder now, in that he'll pick up the ball, ping a vertical ball over for Jordi Alba or for Dest or Dembele or someone, who will then cut it back for him to then shoot and score, or for them to get an assist. That's the more sort of player he is. He is a much deeper sort of midfielder. Koeman was playing a 4-2-3-1 earlier this season, and so he literally was playing in the attacking midfield role for a lot of it, which is why his goal rate declined. And by the way, so people think that he's not doing so well. He was, up until this weekend, the top scorer in the Liga. So, he is still a phenomenal player. His pass rate is incredible. Out of all the players in Europe, he has created the most chances this season, according to a stat that I saw the other day. So he is still playing very well. As to him wanting to be at the club or not, it's difficult to say. Because he sent this burofax in the summer, which would indicate he wanted to leave. But then changes actually kicked in. Bartomeu did leave. There's the potential of Xavi coming in. He's got a real good link with Pedri in the team. And so he had an interview over December talking about everything that happened in the summer. He's calmed down now. He's a bit happier with the squad. He says he's very happy with the way the team is playing. He's definitely staying for the rest of the season. But he said that he doesn't know whether or not he wants to leave. And when he says that, I think he means it. I honestly don't think that he knows what he wants to do. He said a possibility. I think that if he is to leave, this is the most likely. A possibility is that in 2022, at the end of that season, he might leave Barcelona because that's when Luis Suarez's contract ends with Atletico Madrid, and the two of them will go to Inter Miami, David Beckham's team. I think if he is to leave, that sounds the most likely.
Manager, what does everyone think of? Sorry to interject there. I just thought it was apt. Obviously, appointed the manager.
Phil Neville.
There was some controversy. Beckham had to come out and say, "Look, it's not due to personal connections."
I mean, there's a lot that can be said about Phil Neville. I mean, I don't know if this is the right pod for it, but I mean, he was completely.
I thought
he's been completely underwhelming everywhere he's been. He was a terrible England manager. He was a terrible coach at Valencia. I think he has got the job because of his connections with Beckham. There's no two ways about it.
Gary Neville was the one at Valencia, not Phil Neville.
No, he was a coach at Valencia.
He was the assistant under Gary. Yeah.
Yeah, he was assistant. He was coach.
Your mate, I'd like to think if I was manager somewhere, I'd be like, yeah, let me bring up my coaches. And then Henry comes in, we'll create.
Do you really think? Right? I know we've completely gone from Barcelona to Inter Miami here, but do you really think Phil Neville, of all people, is going to be able to control people like Blaise Matuidi and Gonzalo Higuain? No, absolutely not.
And potentially Messi and Suarez.
No way.
In the dressing
room. Precisely. Potentially Messi and Suarez. There's no way God's green earth is going to happen.
Like, I want a fucking Burger King right now. Get me a fucking Burger King. And Phil Neville's like, I don't really know what we could do for you right here. You know, what sort of scenarios are you envisioning that he can't have?
How much have you had to drink, mate?
Nothing. I'm just. What sort of scenarios are you envisioning that he can't have?
I press X to doubt. But I want to go questioning about Barcelona. I want to know, do you reckon Riqui Puig will leave?
No. And this isn't just me thinking that Riqui Puig won't leave. They've basically made as close as a statement as you can, in that at the start of the winter transfer window, Carlos Aleña, who's one of the other young midfielders that Barcelona have, went out on loan. And Riqui Puig sat down and penned a 2-year extension on his contract and has since played more. So, no, he's definitely staying at the club.
Elena, he's gone to Getafe, hasn't he?
Yep. Getafe, who lost to Bilbao today.
So what changed?
I tell you what, I can't believe I'm talking about this. Bilbao. Can we just talk about Marcelino for a second, please?
Oh, yeah. Marcelino is by far the best Spanish manager in La Liga right now.
Agreed.
He's incredible.
Agreed.
Yeah. They got very lucky, Bilbao Athletic Club, to get Marcelino.
They really did.
Honestly, the biggest mistake was... I mean, there was all the confusion with his position with Villarreal and Valencia and how he went between the clubs. I mean, I don't know what on earth they were thinking letting him go there. I think there was some controversy over his wife, who supports Gijón, and Marcelino apparently drew with them or lost to them on a day that prevented them from being relegated, and this had a factor in him being sacked and moving to the other club. But yes, he's a phenomenal manager, and let's just, noting that Bilbao have just, as we've been recording this, beat Getafe 5-1, and Getafe are a difficult team to beat. Bilbao's games...
Did you just nick the rest of that vodka?
Sound like a West Bromwich Albion. He's trying to make out they're some sort of Leicester, and they're definitely down there with Fulham. Surely that's the comparison that can be made between.
No. Like Jack says, Marcelino's pretty.
Well, Marcelino's first games since he was appointed manager. His first game was Barcelona. His second game was Atletico Madrid. His third game was Real Madrid. Then he had, I think it was Elche, so he had a brief pause. Then he had Barcelona again. So He lost the first time to Barcelona 3-2, which it's 3-2 seems narrow, but admittedly it was 3-1 for Barcelona, and they scored the second in like the 90th minute. The Atletico game was cancelled for, I think it was snow. It may have been COVID. It was one or the other. So he didn't play the Atletico one, so he got lucky. He beat Real Madrid. He beat Barcelona the second time. So I mean, yeah, the fact that he's able to walk into a team, first games of those teams, and win all but one of them is pretty incredible. I mean, it shows the caliber of the manager.
Talking about Spanish managers, I've always thought Marcelino was one of the most underrated. I mean,
yeah, I think that he's very rated in La Liga, but because he doesn't have the international recognition outside of it, you won't have Premier League fans, for instance, waxing lyrical about him.
Didn't he win the Copa del Rey with Valencia?
Against Barcelona, yeah.
Yeah.
He's an incredible manager.
I actually know my shit. Like
the one problem with Marcelino that I have, but this is my taste more than it is anything else, is that he plays defensive football, which I personally am not keen on. But it gets him the results, and you can't falter him with that. So yeah, I agree. He's an absolutely incredible manager. He deserves all the credit that he gets.
So, thank you for joining us on the first ever episode of Footie Takes. I've been Henry. I've been joined by two Dax and Charlie. We'd like to see you next week when we continue to discuss the biggest topics and debates regarding Europe's top leagues. But for now, this has been us and our 30 Takes. See you next time.
Thanks, guys.